Span, your primary source for campaign 2018.
This November, there's an open seat in California's 49th congressional district, now that Republican Congressman Darrell Issa is retiring. The candidates looking to succeed him are Republican Diane Harkey and Democrat Mike Levin. Their recent debate in San Diego is just under an hour.
NBC 7 Decision 2018 District 49 debate starts now.
It's a neck-and-neck congressional race to November to replace a retiring Darrell Issa and represent a major coastal district in the North County. From a heavy military presence in Camp Pendleton to exclusive coastal communities in Encinitas and Carlsbad to working-class Republicans and Democrats in Vista and Oceanside, Congressional District 49 is a microcosm of California.
And with such a large representation of people comes highly contested issues: immigration, gun control, the military, and the environment, just to name a few. Who is the best candidate to lead, make tough choices, and make District 49 better?
Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the NBC 7 49th District Debate. I'm Mark Mullen.
I'm Catherine Garcia. Let's get started by welcoming our candidates tonight for the 49th District. Republican Diane Harkey is the chairwoman of the State Board of Equalization. She served 3 terms in the California State Assembly, representing the 73rd District. She lives in Dana Point.
Democrat Mike Levin is also here. Mr. Levin has worked as an attorney focused on environmental and energy regulatory compliance and government affairs. He has served as executive director of the Democratic Party of Orange County, and he lives in San Juan Capistrano. Thank you both for being here, candidates.
Thank you.
And also joining us this evening is our pal, NBC 7's Alex Prochet. He covers politics here at NBC 7, and he'll be joining us and asking the questions this evening.
Okay, so you know a little bit about tonight. We're not going to be staging a traditional style debate, more of a discussion on a range of topics. Our sole focus is to provide as much insight as possible about the candidates to you, the voter, in 1 hour. Yes, we will cover the big topics important to the district, but Catherine, Alex, and I will also be posing questions that speak to leadership, loyalties, priorities, and we'll also squeeze in some short answer Q&A and a lightning round, all to give you more information about these 2 candidates.
And we also wanted to hear some questions directly from the voters. So we're going to be checking in with our live debate audience at Maricosta College in Oceanside. There they are, all in place, students and some other voters as well watching along. Again, they're going to have some questions for the candidates as well. So, shall we get started?
Let's get started.
Let's get started. In many voters' minds, this midterm election is really a referendum on President Trump. I'd like to know if you believe the current administration's policies are moving our country forward or backward. In other words, is the country in better shape because President Trump is in office? And Mr. Levin, we'll start with you.
Well, first of all, thanks so much to NBC 7 and thanks to Maricosta College. I also have to thank my wonderful wife, Chrissy, who's watching at home with our 2 young kids. I am running as a clean energy advocate and environmental attorney with deep background trying to protect our air quality and our water quality. And no, in that regard in particular, I do not think the Trump administration is headed in the right direction. I believe in an environmental protection agency that actually wants to protect the environment, not one that wants to bring back lead paint and mercury and asbestos, one that wants to drill off the California coast. In our district, which goes all the way from Dana Point down to Del Mar and UC San Diego, has 52 miles of coastline. And I think you need a member of Congress who's going to roll up their sleeves and try to solve problems, not create more of them. I'm tired of the toxicity. I'm tired of the hyper-partisanship that we're seeing in Washington, D.C. And my wife and I always tell our 6-year-old and our 4-year-old, don't lie, don't bully, always treat people with respect. And for our 6-year-old, he now has homework. We tell him, be prepared and study and do your homework. If that's good enough for our 6-year-old and our 4-year-old, it's certainly good enough for our leaders in Washington, D.C., which includes our president and the members of the House.
Ms. Harkey, do you believe that the current administration's policies are moving our country forward or backward?
I don't think you can deny that economically we are moving forward. We've got the lowest unemployment. We've got huge job creation. The biggest problem we have in this district is finding qualified people for the positions, and that's a good thing to have. I mean, 9.2% unemployment growth across the nation is not bad. People's 401ks, their pensions, everything's doing much better now because of the reforms that have taken place. So on that aspect, I think we're 100% in agreement. I don't approve of offshore drilling. I have been involved in this district. Actually, I've lived here almost all of my adult life. I've lived in Southern California since I was 9 years old, and in this district most of my adult life. And I've worked as a mayor on ocean water quality issues, on runoff from development. We worked on Salt Creek development, or a plant rather, to clean up that water. I've worked on issues to clean up beaches that have been stagnant, where there's been no circulation due to breakwaters or whatever. I've done a lot in those areas, and I also helped to work on issues with the New River, with who is now supervisor in Riverside County, V. Manny Perez. We worked on an issue with him. So I do believe we are making progress. I do think that in a lot of environmental issues, California is just going to be a little bit different, and we need to understand that. I've worked in the legislature. I understand what we do. And I understand the way the votes are crafted. And right now, I think that on the economy and on issues overall, we're doing a very good job. I think you can't deny that we finally got a new NAFTA, which will be good, I think, for all three countries. Very excited about that. So there are a lot of positive momentum. Some people don't like his style, which is pretty New York and in your face, and I'd like a less treating, but I would say that, on substance, on the economy, which hits people's pockets, that's what's important right now, and we need to keep that going.
There is no doubt that you all must have seen the Kavanaugh hearings, and it's hard to find an example which illustrates the divisiveness and rancor which can exist in the Senate, in Congress, and in American politics today. Neither of you is always described as a moderate, progressive, conservative. How would you all reach across party lines to try and get stuff done? Ms. Harkey, let's begin with you, please.
I was actually able to do that, not as much in the legislature, because the party who runs the House controls the agenda, controls the bills, and there's a lot of gamesmanship that go in the bills. You might have a bill with one or two really good things, and then the rest of it you can't tolerate, but that's kind of an on-purpose game to be sure that one party is not voting with the other. I'm sorry, but that's the way it works. And I would tell you that I have a voting record, but I've also have a record of service. And so I worked across the aisle. I was able to get improvements in public safety funding, help with some of the public safety officers' pension plans. I was able to also work on, like I said, issues for cleanup. I worked on transportation projects for San Diego, because San Diego works very cohesively, Republican or Democrat. They try to get things done for San Diego. And we were able to do a lot of things collectively, but on the big, partisan divide issues, the ones that make the press, that's where the rubber doesn't meet the road as far as bipartisanship. But I think I know a lot of the California delegation that's in Congress right now. We've all worked together in the legislature, and I think I'd be able to hit the ground running to get some things done and to get cooperation. One of them being San Onofre. We have to get, the waste moved. Right. We need our whole delegation on board to do that, to put California at the top of the list. Okay. I think what people often try to do is say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, but you need 219 votes in the House, and you need 60 votes out of the Senate to get anything done. So that means there's a lot of compromise.
Right. Mr. Levin.
I believe it's critically important that we work across the aisle on areas of bipartisan concern, one of which is the environment, and I have worked across the aisle for many years with Republicans and Democrats alike, and we have gotten a lot done. And I'm extraordinarily proud of the work that we've done in California on clean air and clean water. Senator John McCain recently passed away, and it struck me in a way that I did not expect, because for many years I didn't vote for Senator McCain, but I never doubted his patriotism. I never doubted his service to the country. And I always appreciated and respected that the reason he served was for a cause greater than his own self-interest. And I think we're lacking that in Washington today. We're lacking people who are thinking of greater than themselves. I do have to take exception to a couple of things that Ms. Harkey said. One is that our pension system really is under attack by this administration. Fewer and fewer people have pensions. 401ks and IRAs, nothing wrong with them, but only 32% of the eligible workforce invest in a 401k or an IRA, and too many of them are under-investing in those programs. There is rising inequality. I see it in our district. I've had 184 house parties all across the 49th district, and as I listen to people, their concerns, their challenges, making ends meet, in an expensive place like North County, San Diego. Over and over again, they are worried about the cost of living. They are worried about retiring with dignity. Ms. Harkey in the California legislature did vote to make it easier to drill off the California coast, regardless of what she chooses to say this evening. And she also recently told the San Diego Union Tribune that she could not determine conclusively whether the climate was changing or whether man was causing climate change. We have scientists in our district all around who can make it perfectly clear, and we have to listen to those scientists. And when you're a legislator, particularly when you're a member of Congress, you don't have the luxury of being uninformed. We need members of Congress who will work with our scientists, who will believe that we have to reduce our emissions, that we've got to clean up our air, our water. I think the time has passed for allowing the polluters to write our climate policies.
Ms. Harkey, do you want to respond to that?
I certainly do. You know, he says he's worked across the aisle. He's lobbied across the aisle. He was a lobbyist. He has never cast a vote. He's never served a constituent. So I take a little bit of issue with that. When it comes time and the rubber meets the road, you have to cast those tough votes. There's a lot pulling on you, and you have to determine what part of a bill or all of it that you can support. And what I've seen up in Sacramento and what I see in D.C. is everybody walking lockstep in with their party leadership. And I have chosen not to do that on many occasions where it mattered for my district and the people I serve. And I would just say that when we had the tax reform bill that came, I went back to D.C. and I went with Sebastian Ridley Thomas to get a better deal for California and to get a better deal for our district. And we were able to accomplish a few things. And so I'm just saying, you know, as far as drilling off the coast, I never approved drilling off the coast. I do approve drilling inland, like in the Bakersfield area and those areas. There's nothing wrong with that. We do, but not off the coast. And for climate change, I believe the climate's changing, but I'm not a scientist. And unfortunately, you get lobbied heavily. And Mr. Levin has been lobbied heavier because he lobbies. That's what he does. So it's in his best interest to support things that pad his pocket, such as, you know, clean energy and hydrogen. Ask him about his hydrogen highway. Excuse me, there's a bug here. Ask him about his hydrogen highway that the state is funding now, $100 million, going to put hydrogen fuel stations up and down the state for his hydrogen car. So I'm just saying this is not the time to say he's cast a vote. He's never cast a vote. And as for the pensions, the stock market's up, 401k's up, stock market and investors in pensions are in the stock market, our pension plans. They do much better when the stock market's up. They do much better when the economy's humming because they need those revenues. So, you know, I think that, you know, it's clear here. I've cast the votes. I've made the tough decisions. I've had to make some really hard decisions. But the regulatory environment that we've got in California and the huge tax burden is what keeps things depressed here. And as far as housing and other things, if we didn't have such strict regulations, we just added at the state another.
You're going to have to hop in here.
Okay, but $10,000 for
I'm going to hop in here if you don't mind. So we wanted to move on to immigration. Catherine, did you have a question on those fronts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is a huge topic that affects us greatly here in this area, in this district. A report issued just today by the Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General says that that department was not ready to carry out the Trump administration's family separation policy, and some of the government's practices, in fact, made this problem worse. I'm hoping that you can share with us your assessment of that situation, how it unfolded, the migrant children crisis, and then what policies and procedures would you support in the future should we have another influx, a wave of families seeking asylum in this country? Mr. Levin, we'll start with you.
Well, I think it is important very quickly that I do correct the record. I am not a lobbyist. I've never been a registered lobbyist. I am an advocate, however, for clean air and clean water, and I rightfully will continue that work because I think it's critical. Okay. I also think our voting records, to the extent Ms. Harkey has one, they very much should be a part of the discussion. Her lifetime score with the League of Conservation Voters is 12%, one of the lowest in the California Assembly during her service. As far as immigration goes, I don't think we should be using Dreamers as bargaining chips, and I don't think we need a wall. I think there are cheaper and simpler ways for us to secure the border. I also believe we need to treat people with dignity and respect. You know, my grandparents on my mother's side were Mexican immigrants. They came to this country when they were very young. My grandfather was 11 years old. My grandmother was only 3 years old. And my mother likes to call them the dreamers of their day. They worked extraordinarily hard, and their American dream eventually resulted in them starting a small business a jukebox rental business. They sent all 5 of their girls to college, including my mom, who became the first in the family with an advanced degree. They believed in an America that is better what we're seeing today with family separation and this fiasco. We need common sense. We need a path to citizenship for all of those who are contributing positively to our society and to our economy. And Ms. Harkey doesn't even support a path to citizenship for dreamers.
I'm specifically asking, though, what will you do if we see another wave of these families? How will you handle this sort of situation?
With humanity and decency, which is what we've done in this country for 240 years, not by sending people to some temporary tent city fiasco in Texas or by treating them as though they're subhuman. Ultimately, you need someone who acts with empathy, responsibility, and decency, and I don't see that from the other side. Ms. Harkey started her political career in 2005 by funding a ballot measure to create a state deportation force. She then went on to vote against, really on the fringe of radical immigration policies all these years. Most recently has been backed by a group that the Southern Poverty Law Center calls an anti-immigrant hate group.
So, Ms. Harkey, I'm sure you want to address that, but also can you specifically tell us what you would do in the future to handle this sort of situation at the border?
Okay, nobody was prepared for what happened. And I believe there was a little mayhem that created a bad situation, made a bad situation worse. So it's very important that the children were taken care of. The separation of families, nobody liked. But the bottom line is this has been going on for years, and it occurred under the Obama administration. I believe the Obama administration deported a lot of people, if I don't have the facts right here. But what I want to talk to is more...
So what would you do in the future with this happen?
Okay, very, very important. There were 192 votes to do an immigration reform bill. There were no Democrats at the table. So if they really want to fix this, they get to the table and start negotiating, because we only have 2 senators. And so we need those senators involved. We also need all of our congressional people involved. You have to get votes out of the House. This bill took care of DACA, took care of pathway to citizenship for DACA, and in fact, gave them like a 6-month or 6-year rather visa, permanent visa, and then that was renewable. In the meantime, they could have applied for citizenship like everybody else, but it was tied to building the wall. And let me tell you why the wall was really important is because right now we have a crisis at the border with drug running, human trafficking, and money laundering. And you don't have to believe me. You can read Kamala Harris's report, 2014, on transnational gangs. California their border is just prolific with this, and we need to arrest that. We can't keep that. It used to be that we had immigration was one thing. That's a policy. That's a statute. But national security and border security was totally separate topic. Now they've been mixed together. And so the wall or some kind of safety is necessary. And it's not to keep people out, it's to keep criminals and gang members out. And the immigration policy took care of DACA, took care of visas, took care of H-1B visas, took care of H-2A visas, temporary visas for people coming back and forth across the border for work, took care of the farm workers who have been here for 20 years that the ag industry doesn't want to have to replace after they've had them on the job. It took care of that. I was called allowing amnesty for supporting this, but it was not amnesty. It was actually resolving an issue and putting in safeguards for workforce development and other things that we really do need. And we couldn't get any Democrats at the table. And do not tell me they're not going to bring this up every 2 years and tell us that we're racist or something's wrong. We're trying to get this done, and I will work to get this done. That's one of my centerpieces of my campaign.
Okay, let's keep pressing ahead because we have a lot of area to cover, including military and foreign policy. Camp Pendleton, of course, is in the 49th district. So at this point, I was looking at the statistics and preparing for this debate tonight and learned that more than 2/3 of reported veteran suicides are of men over the ages of, clearly over the age of 50, Vietnam era. It also comes at a time when more and more veterans groups are really concerned about PTSD among much younger veterans. It seems to be an issue that really needs to be addressed, but not everybody's getting the care that they need, and it's critical, according to so many. How would you all address this, Mr. Levin?
Well, it would be an extraordinary honor to get to serve in a district with Camp Pendleton, and I will always keep the readiness and preparation of our fine troops there at the front of mind if I'm so honored to serve. What I can tell you is that there are efforts underway to try to privatize the VA, and we should fight those efforts because ultimately the VA is a world-class administrator of medical care specifically for the needs of veterans. And we've got to do everything we can to enhance and protect the VA rather than trying to privatize it. Just the same, I've committed to hiring a full-time liaison with local military experience in my district office. We need to serve them as well as they are serving us, and I'm extraordinarily honored that we've started a Veterans Committee. It's headed by a Brigadier General in the Marines. It's also got representation from the Navy and the Army. We have to do all we can, again, to serve those who are serving us. And in this district, that's at the very top of mind, and I will never forget the sacrifices they're making. I'll do everything I can to try to improve access to housing and mental health. We absolutely must have more HUD-VASH vouchers, the formula that the Housing and Urban Development Department uses right now. Disproportionately hurts North County, San Diego. We've got 2,000 homeless in the district.
Right.
Recently had an opportunity to tour at Interfaith in Oceanside, where they're providing temporary housing for veterans. And I can tell you that we have the need for more of those Veterans Assistance VASH vouchers, then we're not getting our fair share.
Okay,
we've got to fix that.
Very well. Ms. Harkey?
Okay, can you repeat the question?
Absolutely.
Because I kind of get lost in his answer.
Absolutely. PTSD seems to be such a chronic problem that is simply not being addressed. I mean, ever since the days of World War I, they all called it something different. So it's nothing new, but the realization of it is we're more aware of it, and apparently more people need problems. What would you do to help?
Well, I'm really involved in mental health issues. I happen to have a family member that had a form of PTSD. It was not caused by war or whatnot, but it was very, very real. Paranoia, schizophrenia is very, very real. And the depression that often comes with PTSD. Mental health issues, the brain is an organ, just like any other organ in the body. Right now, we only treat those issues, but they will be curable over time. I'm firmly convinced. I was down touring at UCSD. They're doing a lot of research on mental health. Financing through the government, through grants, NIH funding, very important. And we need, I was also at Intrepid Warrior, I believe is the name of the group that does the Intrepid, the hospitals that are on Camp Pendleton. That is for brain injury and for trauma. And I think that there's 9 of those or 10 of those across the country. I fully support that effort because the research that comes out of there that will ultimately help our military families will, of course, come out into the general public over time. But there's a lot being done on this. It's not soon enough, but I think there's a whole host of things we need to do with regard to mental illness, and this is one. And I'm glad that people are finally recognizing it. It's not something that happens infrequently. Trauma affects the brain. And so I'm very supportive of it. I think that I've been on the base. I've had volunteers and I've been involved in the legislature. I've been involved at the board. I've researched funding and tax breaks for the base, and I've also helped. And I think that the new budget plan that we just put out from the Congress has really helped for the funding and for military increases, pay increases. So there's a lot of good things, but this is really a traumatic stage right now with mental health. And I think I'm glad that it's really getting recognized. Okay. There's a lot that can be done.
Okay, very well. So at this point of the debate, we'd like to turn it over to our first live question from voters this evening. NBC 7's Danny Freeman joins us now at Mira Costa College, now in Oceanside. Danny.
Hey guys, that's right. As you can see, we have a pretty packed house here in Mira Costa College here in Oceanside. A number of Harkey supporters, a number of Levin supporters, but we want to get right into some questions from the audience that we've been taking all evening on note cards. First, we have Mark Mendoza. You're 22 years old, from Oceanside, at the moment undecided. Mark, your question for the candidates.
Yeah, my question is, many graduates experience difficulty in finding relevant employment when they enter the workforce. Gainful employment regulations withhold federal funding from programs whose graduates have significantly more student debt than their earnings potential. The Trump administration has recently proposed to rescind gainful employment regulations. How should Congress ensure that students are able to pay off their loans and find gainful employment?
Thank you, Mark. To you guys in studio.
Very well. Mr. Levin, want to start?
Well, first of all, Mark, thank you for your question, and I would look forward to rolling up my sleeves and trying to work on this student loan crisis. which is $1.5 trillion, and it's the next bubble waiting to burst if we're not careful. What breaks my heart is when you see the high interest rates that are being charged to some students as well as their parents. Now they're the parent plus loans where sometimes you see 13, 14% interest. I think we need to renegotiate those loans at lower rates. If the banks are borrowing from one another at 3 and 4%, there's no reason why students should be paying so much higher. I also think we need to expand loan forgiveness programs for all those who would like to seek a career in public service, whether that's undergrad or grad. And I'm a supporter of the College for All Act, which would really help those going to community college or four-year in-state universities. It would really help them get a leg up so they could choose the career path that was most relevant to their passion rather than the one that they had to choose because that's the only one that they could afford to pay back their student loans and be able to live in a place like Greater San Diego. So I want to also work with our local companies. Just the other day I was with one of our larger aerospace
And I'll
employers.
ask you, because we're not keeping a clock on this, if you could just keep your answers relatively short. We want to make sure before we hit the top of the hour to give Ms. Harkey a chance to respond.
Of course, I'll be very brief. So the 49th District is the center of the innovation economy. Biotechnology, life sciences, clean energy technology, IT, aerospace, and defense. I want to do everything I can so that the companies don't need to look any further than our local schools, universities, and vocational programs, so that Mark and others like him can find that job right here in the 49th District, and so they don't have such a huge student loan debt burden where they can't afford to live here.
Okay. Ms. Harkey.
Well, I've been really involved with the community colleges that use private sector and work with the colleges on intern programs and whatnot. And that's what's happening now in the biotech and biomed industry with the car dealers. Everybody seems to be wanting to get involved, and I'm encouraging it to get involved public-private partnerships so that the students are getting the skills they need for the jobs that are available. And especially in Maricosta College, I know they're working closely with the biotech community for manufacturing jobs and other things that will clean manufacturing that we need. And they are having trouble right now finding employers or finding people for the jobs that they have. And so it's better if they can hire within the district rather than trying to get people coming from out of the state because of our high cost of living and other things. So there's a lot of programs going on. As far as the student loans, I think it's shameful that kids have been led down this path of putting a mortgage on themselves, in essence, before they even get out of school. And I think that, we need to have a little bit more discipline in the program. I do agree that the interest rates need to be reduced for this. This is not something that should cripple kids coming out of school. And I do believe, though, that we need to have more. And the public service is great, but we need to have more professions that people can get into and be sure that they're taking the courses they need to get a job when they get out of college.
Okay.
If I may, if you want to get anything done about this problem, you've got to have members of Congress who will stand up to Betsy DeVos. And I will, and I don't think the Republicans in Congress will.
Talking about President Trump's education secretary. So we're going to give the candidates, give you guys a quick break.
And when we come back, we're going to have a rapid fire round, talk about some more big issues. So we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Thank you.
NBC 7 Decision 2018. District 49 debate starts now.
So welcome back to the 49th Congressional District debate. Tonight, the two leading candidates are gracious enough to join us here in the studio this evening.
Democrat Mike Levin and Republican Diane Harkey are here talking about a bunch of issues before the November election, which is now just a little bit more than a month away. Okay, this is what we're calling the lightning round. Candidates, we are looking for really quick answers here. Yes or no is great. One quick sentence if you feel absolutely necessary. No more than that. Alex is going to lead the charge.
I'm going to tag in here. Okay. Ms. Harkey, we're going to begin with you. Would you support the creation and funding of a Space Force?
Yes.
Mr. Levin?
We already have one. It's called NASA. Commander Mark Kelly said it was unnecessary.
Okay. Mark, we're going to begin, or Mike, excuse me, we're going to begin with you. Should transgender troops be allowed to serve openly in our military?
Absolutely. They are perfectly fit to serve, and how dare this administration go down that path and say that they cannot serve?
Ms. Harkey?
Certainly.
Next up, should NFL players be banned by the league for kneeling during the national anthem?
No, I think that's up to the league to decide whether or not they want viewers.
No, my grandfather fought in World War II to provide people the opportunity to protest as they saw fit. those who are protesting police brutality, yes, they can take a knee.
Mr. Levin, the Iran nuclear deal, should we be in it?
I think it was a wrong-headed decision to abdicate the nuclear deal. It wasn't perfect, but I think that we lack a cohesive policy as it pertains to Iran and much of the Middle East.
I think we should not be in it. I think it was bad for us. It allowed Iran to build up nuclear weapons. I think everything's under negotiation right now. We're seeing a new world.
Okay. Should the U.S. rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement? Ms. Harkey?
No.
Absolutely we should. We went from a leader on climate to an absolute laughingstock, and we should be ashamed of this administration.
Excuse me. No, no. We put our own industries and our own country at risk and allowed polluters to pollute.
Ours is the only industrialized nation in the entire world that has abdicated our
Ours was the nation that was carrying the world. I'm sorry.
We have gone from a leader the world over on global climate change to a laughingstock.
Well, you can lead as long as you're paying the way for everyone, but I don't really think that's the way we want to do it.
Mr. Levin, are the president's new tariffs with China a good thing?
No, they are raising prices on American consumers. They are costing us jobs, and ultimately these tariffs are rejected by most in our district who know the local economy depends on good, free, and fair trade with our partners.
Well, I guess the quick response is gone. So I'm just going to say that this is a negotiating point. I support free trade. I support fair trade. I think we've just seen what can be negotiated with NAFTA, and with NAFTA being negotiated, we're going to be able to negotiate a lot harder with China.
Okay, let's condense these answers. We've heard a lot of campaign estimates talk about the spending in this district, upwards of $18 to $20 million estimated. I've heard from some of these camps before November 6th. Is too much money being spent in this district?
Yes, and I'm really honored by the fact that our campaign has been funded by grassroots contributions, not a dime in corporate PAC money. Ms. Harkey's campaign has been funded by the National Rifle Association, the Koch brothers.
Sorry to
We do need campaign finance reform, Alex, absolutely.
Okay, yes, there's way too much money, and most of it's dark money coming from outside the district to fund Mr. Levin's campaign. All of my campaign dollars have been hard-earned and hard-raised in this district. And so I don't have any IEs or outside funding coming in to carry me. He's been carried over the line with a lot of outside money. He doesn't have a strong district following.
Again, rapid fire. We want to get through all of this.
We'll find out on election day.
Okay, Ms. Harkey, who has been the best president in the United States ever?
Oh my goodness, we've had a lot of really great ones. I think Abraham Lincoln was definitely one of those, that he stood the line, gave up probably a big part of his life to set the slaves free and to try to make some unison in the country.
Mr. Levin?
Well, we actually agree on this. I thought Abraham Lincoln was an extraordinarily effective president, and I wish the current Republican Party would more embrace his legacy.
Okay. Should we reform the Electoral College or keep it as is? Mr. Levin?
I think it should be reformed. I think it's... Please, go ahead.
Okay. Ms. Harkey?
I think it serves its purpose, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think when you lose an election, you get upset, but, you know, it is what it is.
What is the biggest military threat the United States faces at the moment? Ms. Harkey?
Probably military threat. I would say you've got, you know, I mean, there's a lot of Cold Wars right now, so I would say maybe pardon me, I'm just trying to think. There's so many little threats around the world. I'm thinking maybe it's the, you know, Iran is a problem.
Iran?
I think, yes, Iran.
Okay. Mr.
I'm
Levin?
deeply concerned about North Korea. This president went from asking for fire and fury, now saying that we have a love affair with Kim Jong-un. We need consistency and clear-headedness, not this volatile foreign policy.
Have you ever participated in a protest or demonstration? If so, which one? Mr. Levin, will begin with you.
I protested happily in many of them in front of Daryl Ice's office. There were 68 rallies that were organized by great people across this district, many of whom had never been out and protested before. 68 of them led to Daryl Ice's retirement. I probably attended 25 or 30 of them. We even caught Daryl Ice up on the roof at one of them.
All right. Ms. Harkey?
Well, that was great showmanship. I've actually protested for real people at real places. I protested to try to fight this gas tax that's a problem. You know, we pay some of the highest gas taxes anywhere in any state. So I really think that, you know, when you have hired help to show up to protest for you, I don't think that shows a true spirit.
I'm going to hop in here because, Mark, I think you have a really important topic that this kind of leads into.
which speaks to leadership, and this will be a bit of a variety as well. But let me begin by asking you all, on what issues do you differ from the highest ranking members of your party? For you, Ms. Harkey, President Trump. For you, Mr. Levin, Nancy Pelosi.
Well, I think I'm more aggressive when it comes to clean energy than many members of my party who want to see continued reliance on fossil fuels for many decades to come. I think we need to get over our dependence on fossil fuels as soon as we can. I'm proud of California passing SB 100, which enabled 100% clean energy for our investor-owned utilities by 2045. And I think we can take that kind of leadership to Washington and try to get things done. And ultimately, if we don't do it, our kids and our grandkids are going to pay the price in dirtier air, dirtier water, and a dirtier future. I don't think that's what we want.
Ms. Harkey.
I think I differ from the administration a lot with the offshore drilling and other things that affect California in particular. I also had a little bit of pause with the tax reform bill. I'd like to go back and make some modest changes to it to help us get more SALT refund from the property tax. I think it's really important in California. And as far as SB1 and clean energy, some of that is going to be supporting the roads and whatnot, but most of it's going to the state's all going to the state's general fund. When it goes to the state's general fund, it gets swiped and used for other purposes. So that's why I can't support that.
Okay.
This is kind of a two-part question, but very much all part of the same topic. I'm wondering if you think Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller is conducting a political witch hunt. And I'd also like to know, as part of your answer, if you think the president should testify before the special counsel. Ms. Harkey, we'll start with you.
I don't think the president should testify before a special counsel. I think the president, I believe, has some sort of immunity, and I think enough chaos in the administration right now and enough chaos in the Democrats that are opposing him with resist. I don't think it's good. I think the special counsel ought to continue on with his job, which he seems to be doing, get to the bottom of the problem, find out if there was Russia collusion and where and when and how it happened. But I think that this has become much ado about nothing. Let the prosecutor do his job, and then let us come back with the facts.
Mr. Levin.
Well, if it was a witch hunt or is a witch hunt, it's the most extraordinarily successful witch hunt in the history of witch hunts. And I guess it is Halloween. But Robert Mueller needs to be able to conduct his investigation without the politicization of the House Intelligence Committee as it's led by Devin Nunes. Devin Nunes has withheld relevant testimony and information from Mr. Mueller and his investigators that would have made, I think, significant progress in the investigation. I worry a lot when I see the House not upholding its constitutional responsibility to try to be a fair arbiter of the facts and get to the truth. And I'll be very pleased if Democrats retake the House that my friend Congressmember Adam Schiff, who was the first member of the House to endorse me, became chair of the House Intelligence Committee, because I can tell you that he would share relevant evidence and relevant testimony with Mr. Mueller and the investigative team. We would try to get to the truth. Subpoenas would actually mean something, and I think the country would be a whole lot better off once we found out what really happened in the 2016 election.
We need to go back to this. We need to go back to this. I believe the House committee has requested unredacted documents that they've not been able to procure. So the House should be able to do this. This is part of their investigative process. And as far as, uniting with Mr. Schiff or whatever, their whole purpose to get elected and flip the House is to conduct impeachment hearings. Now, we don't need impeachment hearings, 2 years of impeachment hearings. You have to get it out of the House first. Then you'll need 60 votes out of the Senate to impeach. It's a waste of time, no matter how you feel about it. It throws our country in chaos. We do not need the chaos. He's an impeachment.
I do not seek impeachment.
Yes, you do.
No,
yes,
I do not.
Excuse me.
I only seek justice and the truth.
Mike, I'm sorry, but, look at the Pinocchio book. When you say things that aren't true, something's going to happen and it won't be good. You support impeachment.
I am not running on an impeachment platform.
Well, your leader is running on an impeachment program, and they're all trying to keep it quiet because they want to get there and create chaos. We need to calm things down in this nation. Very important that we just. If you want to re-elect another president at some point, wait till the term is up.
Okay, last word to you, Mr. Levin, then we're going to move on. One sentence or two, and then we got to get moving.
It was Congressmember Darrell Issa who wrote a book released in 2016 called Watchdog. I actually read the book in anticipation of running against Mr. Issa, and he said that one of the key responsibilities of the legislative branch was to be a check on the executive in case the executive attempted to run amok. Now, he was writing in the context of President Obama, who he called the most corrupt president. Now, think about that. He called Barack Obama the most corrupt president. And now that Donald Trump, with the Emoluments Clause violations and everything else that we're seeing, all the smoke that's there, we just need to know where it's going to lead. We need to get to the truth.
Right, Mr. Levin, do you believe in the existence of a deep state?
No, I don't. I think that if anything, this president, this administration, perhaps is attempting to create one.
Ms. Harkey?
A deep state. There is a bureaucracy, and let me tell you what happens. If you set to upset the apple cart, you have to find the people in the state government that are willing to work with you. And I think a lot of this constant back and forth is not helpful. You don't want to get people afraid to come on your side and work with you. And I was able to work very, very well in the state of California by working with staff, finding the members that would work with me, and finding the staff members that would help me. And that's the way to get things done. I think that there is people are afraid. They're afraid of their jobs. I do believe that there's been a lot of mayhem in the FBI leadership, not in the rank and file. And, that's what happens, I think, over time. People get to feeling like they are the elected person and they should monitor. But the people elect the Congress people and the senators and the president. And this president was elected. As much as it may dismay some, I think he's got a strong following and he's done a good job in the economic policy area. Speaking
of economy, that's where I want to turn to now. The economy is doing well. Unemployment in the district is low. But when you look at research from mortgage backers, HSH in particular, it shows the average San Diegan needs to make about $131,000 in the county to afford a home here. What would you do about this, Ms. Harkey? We'll begin with you.
Well, one of the things I think we need to understand in San Diego that, we have, federal government land and tribal land, a lot of it. And so there's very scarce resources here to build. We're practically built out. And so I don't think people notice that when they drive up and down the freeway. They see a lot of open space, but it's not open space. It is really not buildable. So I think whatever we can do to make things a little bit more affordable and and also to increase transportation options for people, to put in the roads and the freeways and the things that we need so that people can live further away but still get to work. I think San Diego has some of the worst traffic I have ever seen, and it seems to be almost continual now. So people are in their cars, but they're having to commute long ways because that's where the housing is, and you can't move them all downtown. So I think we need to improve transportation. We need to cut down on some of the regulation. Some of the regulation is increasing the cost of homes, like the $10,000 now for solar panels that have to be on new homes. It's very difficult to decrease the price of housing if you're going to keep adding to the burden of building it. Land use is another thing. Land, I think about 50% of cost of building a home is in land. So to the extent that you can help with the regulatory environment in the planning approval process, you will in fact get lower priced housing.
Okay, Mr. Levin, there was a lot there, but go for it.
Well, I think it starts with tax policy. This tax plan, as it's impacted most working families in our district, has been a negative. The reality is the state and local tax deduction was capped at $10,000. The mortgage interest deduction was capped at $750,000. And if you want to see a great example of an op-ed where it uniquely discussed the problems with the tax policy as it pertained to California taxpayers, look no further than a 2017 op-ed written by Darrell Issa, when he explained that this tax policy was uniquely unfair to Californians, and that's why he opposed it. Now, the problem is that we need infrastructure, we need housing, but instead we've given the money for infrastructure, the federal investment in infrastructure that should occur, away for the Republican tax plan. 81% of the tax breaks have gone to the top 1% of tax earners. The average commute in our district is 27 minutes. There is a lot of traffic, and we need a significant amount of federal infrastructure investment. And if we were to do that, not only would it help with that commute time, so people could spend more time with their families, but it would also reduce the burden on the state and local government, which seems to be the topic of much political discussion these days. Let the federal government do its job on infrastructure, and if Democrats retake the House and perhaps the Senate, I think we could work with this president on an infrastructure proposal that would greatly benefit the residents of San Diego. We also need more affordable housing. We need housing that's transit-oriented. We need to do everything that we can to ensure that Housing and Urban Development corrects its funding formulas. As of right now, we've got one of the highest per capita needs for affordable housing, but we're in the middle of the pack as it pertains to our federal funding for that housing because of the age of our housing stock. My friend Congressman Scott Peters is somebody who's working on that. I'd be interested in working closely with him on it. I know we can get it done.
Something else that affects everybody is health care, of course. Mr. Levin, you support eventual, at least, Medicare for all. Ms. Harkey, you do not. I'd like you to tell one another why you think the other person is wrong. And we'll start with you, Mr. Levin.
Well, what I believe is that we've got to protect the Affordable Care Act first, because when I look at the impact of the Affordable Care Act in our district, before there was 15% uninsured, today it's 6.4% uninsured. But what I worry about is what the Republicans in Congress are trying to do to destabilize the exchanges. The average family of four, their health care premiums would go up by $2,700 next year under the Republican plan. What they also want to do is have an age tax. They tried to pass what they called Trump Care, or the so-called American Health Care Act. And what it would have done is increase premiums for those between ages 50 and 64 up to 5 times. I think we need to reduce costs for those in that age range, not increase costs. And I must remind that Ms. Harkey voted 5 times in the California Assembly against coverage for those with pre-existing conditions. She voted against expanding Medi-Cal in California. She voted against women's health coverage, mental health coverage. Those are the facts. I recommend everybody take a look at her legislative record, because she does have a voting record and she needs to be held to account for it.
Ms. Harkey.
Well, it's real nice for Mike to say what he would do, but he's never cast a vote. So let me just tell you, his plan is a $32 trillion over 10 years. Now, we would have to double the income tax, and we would have to throw probably seniors off. There would be no workplace provided health care plans. This is a terrible plan. Right now, Medicare itself, or Medicare is kind of underfunded. What's happened in California, and the reason I voted against those things, is because Medicaid itself, as the single-payer health plan that he professes to want, because he tells everybody we're eventually going to have to get there. That cuts off providers, doctors. You can have a health insurance policy, but doesn't mean you're going to find anyone to provide for you. And this is what was happening under Obamacare, not necessarily in California because we have a huge market, but across the nation, providers were disappearing, and so were insurers. So there's a better way. What Obamacare was throwing people out of the market, doubling their premiums, and creating shortages. Now, what the Republicans just passed, or in the House, did not fix that. And it's really kind of unfortunate. There's a lot of things that it did take care of, but it did not fix the problem with pre-existing conditions. I think we can do better. I think there's some areas of the ACA, it's obvious we're not overturning it. We need to probably beef that up where it works. But I do know that the Medicaid funding that's coming to California is not enough. It's constantly being decreased as a reimbursement to the doctors, and the doctors are leaving right now. And that's why they're asking for more H-1B visas to bring people from out of the nation into the nation to practice medicine. And so I think that's wrong. I think we do have to be sure that the doctors are being, being reimbursed at a proper rate. We need to keep them. And we also need to be sure to understand that across the United States, markets are different, population centers are different. And so Medicare for all, a $32 trillion, or Medicare for all, a $32 trillion increase is not where we want to go.
All right, thank you very much. I know it's a big topic. We could talk about it for a long time. We want to make sure that we save some time for those voters and the students that are out there that wanted to ask some questions and weigh in on this.
That's right. So let's head back to Mira Costa College in Oceanside, where NBC7's Danny Freeman is, and a lot of students and stakeholders patiently waiting. Thank you, and take it away.
You bet. And I'd just like to say that I think everyone here very much enjoyed the rapid fire portion that you guys just went through. We have more questions here. I'm going to get straight to it. We have Erica Guerrero right here. Would you mind standing up for a moment? Erica lives in Oceanside. She's 31 years old and is undecided. Tell me, what would you like to ask these candidates?
So my question is, I lived in Carlsbad for 25 years and now recently had to move to Oceanside because of housing costs rising. And my question is, how do you plan to involve residents in the decision-making process in our towns?
Back to you guys.
All right, Ms. Harkey, we'll start with you.
Well, I guess I'm not sure which decision-making process, but I've always held a lot of community open houses and other things. I've always come back to the district, as I do now on the State Board of Equalization. I travel around the district and explain tax policy and other things that are useful. When I was in the legislature, we had town halls. We had teletown halls as well, so that if you couldn't get to them, you could at least hear us talk. There's a lot of ways to communicate, and I've always worked with my constituents. I'm a bit of a populist. I see my constituents' needs. I try to work with them as best I can, and where I can't, I try to explain what the problem is.
Mr. Levin.
Well, what I've pledged is that I would want to have one town hall meeting a month, at least, and the voters will let me know if they get tired of that. You know, Darrell Issa has had 3 of them in a decade, and I think that's a big reason why a lot of people in this district are seeking different representation. They want to see somebody who's actually going to roll up their sleeves, work with the community leaders, and try to get things done, try to solve problems for the community, not create more problems. And I'm really honored by the fact that in virtually every city I've been endorsed by either the mayor or a couple of city council members. I don't need any on-the-job training to call them up and to begin to have those meetings necessary to address the specific problems in their areas. We've got 10 amazing cities in this district. Each of them has their own unique needs, their own areas of interest, but I know that I'd be a representative that could bring them together for the common needs of our district and hopefully for greater San Diego as well.
All right, let's get back out to Danny, see if we can get one more question there from Oceanside for the candidates. Danny?
You bet. Right here I have Henry Molina. You're 25 years old. You're also undecided at the moment, and you live in Carlsbad. Is that right?
Correct.
Go ahead.
Excellent. Good evening, candidates. My question is that the studies have shown that freeway expansion encourages more use over time and does not reduce traffic or pollution. How would you change policies at the federal level in order to meet public and environmental needs?
Back to you guys.
Okay.
Thanks, Danny. All right, Mr. Levin, we'll start with you this time.
Well, we need to invest in mass transit, clean transportation, and that's exactly what I would do. I think we're using an outdated model when we're only talking about freeway expansion. The reality is we've got some extraordinarily sustainable communities in our district, cities that have already started down the path towards community choice aggregation, towards getting to clean energy. I want to be their partner, I want to be their advocate, and ultimately bring federal dollars to bear for those clean transportation and clean energy projects of the future that will ultimately help the quality of life and reduce emissions for all of the residents of the 49th District. That's what we want. We're a coastal community, 52 miles of coast from north to south. You need a member of Congress who's going to believe in climate science, who's going to fight to reduce emissions, and who's not going to give in to the Koch brothers. One of our campaigns has been funded from their money, and one hasn't.
Ms. Harkey.
Okay, I'm sorry. You know, he's been funded from everybody out of this district and everybody out of the state. So, you know, if there's a campaign contribution that somebody finds offensive, bully. But I have represented this district, and I've worked on transportation policy. And what we have, particularly in Carlsbad, is a huge growth in the population. That was a small city. It's now 103,000 people. So you can do some public transit, but people are getting around. Now in Carlsbad, that's where the traffic just backs up terribly. So if in fact you can find a hub that public transportation works, but there's ride sharing, lane sharing, other options we can have along the freeway axis to give people, I mean, they've got it on I-15. You see where the road actually moves so that you can go one way altogether and come back the other way. And I also support, you know, just generally talking with the population, seeing what they need, seeing what they want, but not everybody wants to be on trains and bike back and forth to the depot. I think that doesn't work. We have families that need to get around. We have families that have activities. We need to be sure that there's ability for people to commute, as well as people to drive in their cars and get around when they need to. We have been put on a road diet by Sacramento, and with this new transportation funding that's being talked about out in D.C., we'll be able to get a little bit of everything in it.
Okay, it's amazing how many topics there are and how quickly an hour goes, and you guys have done really good work, and thank you for letting us corral you from time to time. We're just about out of time. We wanted to leave you all about a minute or so just for some closing thoughts. Mr. Levin, want to begin?
Well, I want to again thank NBC 7 and our friends at Maricosta College. I'm so extraordinarily honored to be running for this office and have met so many incredible people along the way who truly care about this community. You know, my opponent, Ms. Harkey, recently told Breitbart that if Democrats retake the House, quote, it'll be like California all over the nation. I have to remind her that we're both running for office here in California, and I happen to love California. I was born here, raised here, and I'm so proud of our state now more than ever, where we stand up for a cleaner environment for one another, where we believe in equal opportunity, where we protect those who are most vulnerable in our society, and I want to bring more of those California values to Washington, D.C. I think it's so critically important that we have a member of Congress who isn't just a rubber stamp for the Trump administration. If you send me to Washington, D.C., I will work extraordinarily hard for the communities of this district. Okay. I'd be honored to have your support.
Okay, 1 minute, Ms. Harkey, please. Final thoughts.
Thank you. I have been honored to represent this district for about 10 years in the legislature as well as on the State Board of Equalization for Tax Policy. I understand what it takes to get votes out of the House, and I have worked very, very hard for this district in every measure. I've passed bills in the legislature that worked for clean water and clean air, and I have also worked on transportation policy. I'm very proud of my record. My opponent thinks he's going to do things and he's going to stand up against the Trump administration. That means impeach. We do not need to go back and forth about this administration. I do believe that Nancy Pelosi is very, very regimented in keeping her caucus together. So anytime you think that he's going
Ms.
to
Harkey, I'm sorry,
oppose that, it's just not going to happen. I've worked for you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much. I ask for your vote.
We appreciate it. And again, sorry for the time limits. It goes really quickly for sure. Special thanks to both the candidates for being here with us this evening. Alex, for helping facilitate the questions with Mark and I.
And we also want to thank everyone at Maricosta College with your terrific questions. And we'll have more voter reaction from there coming up on the news at 11 o'clock. Remember, Election Day is November 6th. From everyone here at NBC 7, thanks very much for watching. Have a terrific night. See you at 11.
See you then.